Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the Old World. And today we return to the theme of an Old World tournament. Hopefully you've watched part 1 where I talked through in some detail the list I was going to be taking to an Old World event at the King and Queen pub in Brighton. It was a one-day tournament consisting of 3 games at 2,000 points apiece. Before I launch into the event itself, I'd like to start with a big thank you to Pete of Brighton Warlords who put the event on. It was really good fun and it was really nice to get 3 games against different factions and people that I've not played against before. So big shout out, thank you very much for organising. It was really good fun. So what are we looking at? For those of you who haven't seen the video I produced for last Friday, a quick run through of the list I was taking. This list consisted of 3 level 4 wizards, all using battle magic, one of which had the ruby ring of ruin. I had 2 engineers rounding out my character slots. The core consisted of a unit of 17 and a unit of 10 crossbowmen, a unit of 7 knights and a unit of 5 knights, the larger of the units having the war banner. The special slots were filled by 3 great cannon and a unit of 6 outriders with a unit champion. Rounding out the list for the rare slots, a steam tank and a hellblaster volley gun. After I made my initial video talking about the list I was going to take, the original rounds were published, so that was done in advance of the day. So I went in expecting to face a Lizardman force. However, because of some issues with later rivals, my table was shifted and I ended up going into Bretonnians. Now, as much as I had a bit of a plan for how the game won a pitch battle, taking on the Lizardmen, I was a lot more concerned about taking on Bretonnians. They are, after all, at the moment, one of the better choices in the game. What did my opponent bring to the table? Well, he had a couple of flying characters, a level 3 mage and a level 1 mage. He had a couple of units of Knights of the Realm on horseback and a unit of them on foot. 2 reasonably chunky units of bowmen rounding out his core. He also then had a unit of 5 peg knights, which was definitely something I was concerned about. However, I did note no green knight, and at least the Pegasus knights were only in a single unit, rather than having multiple units spread across the field. I did reasonably well with the spell rolling for this game, getting a couple of fireballs, a couple of pillars of fire, which turned out not to be necessary, and the Curse of Arrow Traction, which is a spell on battle magic that I really like, particularly when it's playing into a reasonably shooty Empire list. Those re-rolling natural ones to hit, really useful. The Bretonnians deployed first, but opted to pray, giving me an opportunity to take the first turn. Unsurprisingly, the first turn wasn't particularly active when it came to movement. In fact, I didn't really move much at all beyond my vanguard move for the Outriders. My shooting wasn't completely devastating, but it was pretty effective. 2 Pegasus Knights fell and 2 Knights of the Realm on horseback took a bit of a beating. 6 Knights falling in total from those 2 units, and I also pinged off one of the Foot Knights. One of the Knights of the Realm units fleeing as a consequence. In the Bretonnian first turn, the fleeing Knights rallied, and a 5+ regen was put on the Pegasus. There was a general advance, units pushing forward. What was interesting is my opponent had deployed his Knights not in lance formation, but in a normal formation in order to reduce the risk posed by my artillery. But what it did mean, of course, is he lost out on some of his space advantages, with obviously lances taking up less real estate and allowing a bit more go forward for those knight units compared to more regular formations. He had also got the Ruby Ring of Ruin that took out 2 of my Outriders, and his archers managed to kill 1 of my crossbowmen. We moved into turn 2, and the great guns of the Empire spoke. The Pegasus Knights fled in a result of the casualties they were taking. And I have to point out at this point, my opponent had really poor luck when it came to leadership tests for his Pegasus Knights. He was never able to really get them back into control, and they didn't really play a meaningful part in the game after that. One of the mounted realm units was destroyed, but I did suffer a big miscast, shutting down my impact from magical attacks and causing wounds across the board. I think 2 wizards got injured at this point, a crossbowman was killed, and a wound got pinked off one of my cannon. So that was pretty bad for me. Bretonnian turn 2 saw a mounted baron charging my outriders, and the mounted duke charging my knights, with the remaining knights of the realm launching themselves into my steam tank. An ultimately suicidal charge. Fortunately, through good use of challenges, I was able to mitigate the damage to my knights and the outriders, and they remained on the table for a little while before they eventually succumbed. Turn 3 saw me drive off one of the units of archers and take out a level 3 wizard in combat. The foot knights continued their march forward into heavy gunfire as they would continue to be whittled down during my turn 3. The Duke, in the ongoing combat with my knights, failed to kill the 4 knights he was remaining in combat with, who merely gave ground. Bretonnian turn 3 saw the Pegasus and archers on my right flank, his left flank, continue to flee. The outriders and knights on my left flank were eventually taken out by the mounted baron and duke, but not after they'd done their work of really slowing down these really powerful characters. Turn 4 saw a barrage of fireballs going into the foot knights and the level 1 prophetess that they were accompanying, or rather was accompanying them, and the cannons continued to open fire. However, they failed to do much material damage. In Bretonnian turn 4, the fleeing archers finally left the field. The Pegasus knights were still fleeing. They were taken out in turn 5 when my knights on the right hand flank pushed up and were able to launch a charge into them. Turn 6 saw the other archer unit fleeing, but very little else happening. Overall, it was a big victory for the Empire. 1,210 points destroyed compared to Bretonnia getting 544. Really being able to hold up the characters on my left-hand flank helped a lot, along with the Pegasus Knights not really getting in. I was quite concerned that if either of those flanks really fell, my line would start to collapse pretty horribly. Fortunately, not the case, and I was able to hold on for a decent victory. I was also pretty pleased because for events like this, I do like to think that it's nice to come away with at least one victory. And I'd achieved that in game 1 and against Bretonnians, which I thought would be quite a difficult game for me because the amount of pace that they can bring to the table, getting across the board and shutting down my opportunities to open fire at them. So I knew whatever happened going forward, I'd achieved this milestone and could be pretty much satisfied with whatever came out as the overall results of the day. Going into Battle 2, it was the Mountain Pass scenario, and this is the scenario where I felt most comfortable going into the tournament that I had a chance of getting some kind of result. I knew I could deploy deep, I could make an opponent walk further into a load of gunfire, and that maximises the opportunities for my force to get a good result. In this particular game, I was up against the High Elves. Now, this wasn't your typical sort of High Elf list. There was no sisters there were no dragons. What there was a big unit of swordmasters. There was a unit of 5, I think, dragon princes. There was some silver helms, some Illyrian reavers, a buffed up mage character on a chariot, a prince on a hippogriff, along with a couple of eagles and 3 units of high elf archers. I didn't get the first turn, and the swordmasters from a marching column pushed forward, then supported by a shrewd casting of arcane urgency and the use of the drilled rule, ended up right in my face. A blast of the Ruby Ring of Ruin caused just enough damage to my large block of crossbowmen on my left flank to flee, taking a wizard with them as they collided and ran through. The archers managed to take down 2 of my outriders as well. This was a very problematic start. The crossbowmen fleeing really meant I had to adjust on the fly. I had kept my larger unit of knights really deep as a reserve and had to push them into the gap to stop myself being overwhelmed by the higher forces of flooding forward. In return, however, when the guns started to speak, the silver helms were decimated, losing a large number of models, and the swordmasters reduced to 2 figures remaining. Both of the eagles were also taken out of action. The pendulum had swung back to the Empire. Turn 2 saw the High Elf General launch an attack into my smaller unit of knights. He took out all of them. The Empire line was once again looking in a particularly precarious state. In response, my shooting wasn't particularly effective, but I did manage to rid myself of the unit of swordmasters with a charge by the unit of 7 halfling knights. Turn 3 saw 2 units of knights, the remaining silver helms and the dragon princes, charge into my artillery battery along with the Lord Hippogriff. They played, as you'd expect, merry havoc with my artillery battery collapsing under the sustained pressure. In order to launch countercharges, I realised that I'd blocked in my unit of halfling knights because there was a wizard in the way, preventing them from launching a charge into the silver helms. The dragon princes by this point had broken through and carried on it going with an overrun. This meant a lone wizard on foot had to get out of the way, and he did so by charging the dragon princes, allowing my knights to charge their preferred targets. In the shooting phase, combined magic and volley gun assault took out the prince on the hippogriff. It was there that the pendulum turned once again, with the pretty bonkers situation as a level 4 wizard on foot casting hammer hands went charging into the back of the dragon princes and battered them. Involved in a challenge, he killed the champion, secured the overkill, ran down a unit of fleeing elves. This at the same time as the silver helms met their demise at the hands of my countercharging knights. Should say by countercharge, I mean countercharging their overall attack. It was a normal charge for the purposes of the rules. The final 3 turns of the game just saw the pendulum of the game swing one side to the other with more and more crazy stuff. My knights were eventually shot off the board. The reavers then taken out by shooting, but the crossbowmen got to them along with my mage, supported by the Hellblaster, which was doing an awful lot of good work in this game. From there, I tried to protect points as much as I could, trying to flee one of my lone wizards away from his wizard on a chariot. I was unable to do so through the good use again of arcane urgency, bringing the chariot into range to fireball my wizard off the table. forcing me to react and really try and go find some points. My steam tank launched itself towards the wizard and the one on a chariot, and after a clash, forced the wizard to flee. Fortunately, the wizard was still fleeing when the game ended, and leading to an Empire victory. 1,691 points to 1,553. It was really close, and there were so many strange things going on in the game, so many big swings of the pendulum, so much nip and tuck, that a couple of dice rolls here or there would have made a huge difference to the overall outcome. Fair play to my opponent. We had a really brilliant game. It was a lot of fun, and there were a lot of laughs throughout as we just went from position after position of looking at the table going, you've won now, I can't see a way out of it, only for the dice gods to intervene and the pendulum to swing back and forth once more. There were so many times we thought that our opponent had got into a really strong position, only for things to go completely awry for them, and the pendulum just keep on swinging. Incredibly, I came into then game number 3 2-0 with an opportunity to win the entire event, something I had absolutely no expectation of when it came to going into the start of the day. So what was game number 3? This was the Breakpoint mission, and I think it's worth pointing out at this point that both my opponents and I completely forgot we were playing the Breakpoint mission. So apart from making sure that we have the right deployment zones, etc., we both ended up treating this actually as a pitched battle, which wasn't ideal. What was I up against? Well, I was up against the Mirror, another Empire list that had also gone 2-0, consisting of 3 Great Cannon, a steam tank, 3 battle mages, only they were all on Pegasus. The main difference being that my opponent had more knights and hadn't got the missile state troops that I'd gone for. Deployment was cagey, and we were doing our best to try and protect ourselves from losing out on that first turn. In the end, that first turn, the roll for turn 1 was absolutely instrumental in how the game went. I got a little bit unlucky when it came to rolling his spells. I had a lot of flaming pillars, which was good, but very little fireballs, and I needed spells that could reach out and touch my opponent. He, however, got quite a few pillars himself, but also fireballs across the 3 wizards that he had. Now, we had expected this to be a fairly cagey game, fairly nip and tuck, not wanting to be offering too many opportunities to our opponent. However, that isn't how it played out. With the turn 1 advantage, the guns of my opponent's Empire army spoke. Now, we did get a couple of rules wrong around panic tests here, but overall it didn't really make a difference. At the end of turn 1, all of my great guns were gone, and my volley gun had been forced into a position where it wasn't really able to take part in the rest of the game. Using Arcane Urgency, a unit of knights had been pushed deep around my flank, meaning I was forced into a position where I would need to react. I was in a really, really bad position. And from there, the game just really went from bad to worse. My blue unit of knights on my right flank tried to charge into a slightly larger unit of Imperial Knights from my opponent, and they were absolutely wiped out. From there, I was penned right back in, forced to constantly move with my crossbowmen to prevent flank attacks, which meant that they weren't really able to offer much of a threat. From there, my army was quite simply picked off. Ultimately, the game was called slightly early when it was obvious that I had no real opportunities or really the tools left in the toolbox to cause any material damage to my opponent. I was wiped off the field of play for the loss of a single Great Cannon. a really disappointing way to end what had been a fun day. However, it was still a nice game. My opponent was really fun. We had a lot of interesting conversations around ways we could use our armies. And for the Empire, the Empire gun lines, which may be the strongest ways of playing the Empire, to go 5-1 across the two armies is not something that we expected at all. And as much as I just said it was a disappointing end to the day, a game that was so one-sided was always going to be a bit disappointing. Overall, I say it was a really good day. Absolutely enjoyed it and would definitely go to another event. In fact, I'm scheduled to go to one in December, albeit this one is built on the basis that meta lists are not permitted, and it's all about having fun, silly lists, things that do things a bit differently. So I'm going to have a bit of fun, I think, putting something together for that. Looking at the Empire, what do I think? Well, the list is stronger than I perhaps thought it would be. Would there be things I could do to improve it? Yes. I don't think the steam tank actually is quite as useful as I thought it was. At 250 odd points, it struggles to get its points back. Yes, it's a threat. Yes, people worry about it and it can hold stuff up. But you can get a lot of things that go bang for those 250 points. Potentially another volley gun, for example, maybe another engineer, a bit more artillery support, maybe padding out my level 4 wizards a bit more to get them some more consistency in their spell casting. So there's definitely ways that this force can be improved, but that's very much something that will be on the back burner. My main drive at the moment being to get my orcs and goblins onto the table at some point in 2025. So there we have it. A rundown of my day at the King and Queen pub for the event. Congratulations to my final opponent, Jonathan. He won a magnificent prize, which was the starter set for 3rd edition Age of Sigmar. I hope he enjoys putting together all of this Skaven. I also hope you've enjoyed this rundown of the event and how I got on. If you've got anything you want to add to what I've said, do drop a comment down below. Any thoughts around things I could do better, always much appreciated. And if you've liked the video, do consider dropping a like and a subscribe. Really good way of helping a small channel such as this one. All that remains for me to say once again is thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.